Hello, myself Sunil Ramkrishnan Nayak, and basically my designation is as a software delivery head. And here basically we are discussing about the formula part. Basically, that is basically you can say 153rd part ongoing. Until 152, we have discussed lots of things. We will discuss a few points of one till 152. What we have discussed. Uh, Basically, we have discussed the formulas, we have discussed the attributes, we have discussed the attribute equals to created from hundreds of balance sheet. We have discussed that the Bollywood industry are basically handling the software industry, and Bollywood industry says that we have almost designed each and every stuff. Bollywood energies are equal to created from the 10 lakh to 20 lakh buildings. Bollywood industry story says that from 20,000 buildings, basically, we have created the entire software industry. So that 20,000 building, wherever it's situated at the location of the earth plane, wherever in the any of the countries, that basically countries are the software industry's location, basically you can say. So there is the user stories of the software industry, software companies, software professionals groups. So software professionals' careers are basically connected with that buildings that are basically 20,000 buildings, and that gets plus minus. So it's very critical. That's why basically nobody disclose the name of that 20,000 place. So we are not discussing that. Basically, we also don't know what is where is that place because it's very critical. Because if anybody says that that is 20,000 buildings, on the base of that, the entire IT industry is working, and employees are also working at the office at big software company like Infosys, Accenture, TCS, Microsoft, Salesforce, SAP, PHP, Python, C, C++, Java, COBOL, mainframe, and Foxpro, D2K, Visual Basic, ASP. These all basically employees are working on the base of these 20,000 buildings. So this is the base of the software, entire software industry. So you can just imagine how critical that place might be. Because if that buildings, anything happens to that buildings, entire software industry is going to suffer. That also very badly. But that basically nobody do this because nobody have basically those this much enemy with software companies and software employees. So nobody will be going to do this because nobody have this much enemy basically with software companies and software employees. So here basically we were discussing about the in last part basically we have discussed the animals basically you can say who basically has created from the Bollywood blood cells. So not only Bollywood blood cells, Bollywood means the actors and actress blood cells. Like this, there are many people basically who are well known, famous people. So from their blood cells also lots of animals, trees, and lots of birds are created. So it's a very deep process, deeply thinking basically stuff. Basically, you can say deeply thinking topic also you can say because whatever things, for example, actor hair from actor blood cells basically the lots of animals are created, lots of dogs are created. So if anything happens to that dog, that means, for example, 500 dogs, 250 dogs are in very bad condition. Then by default, basically, it's going to affect to that actor. By default, which say because it's a opposite direction, opposite effect, basically, you can say. Because why opposite effect? Because the animal blood cells, animals' energies and that actor's energy, both are basically taken by the power companies and nuclear companies and the energy companies, and then basically it get filters and lots of process happens, and then basically again it's sent to the animals and the actors blood cells, because on the base of the blood cells of that actor, the animals are prepared basically. So that is by default basically it's going to effect. But so basically there are big if a actor basically actors are basically very rich people. So basically they have the good money, basically they can spend the good money to find out where these dogs are, basically the 250 dogs which are basically in bad conditions. So they can easily find the dogs conditions and they can find the dog's location and they can do the manipulation whatever they want to do. So that's basically Bollywood's lifestyle. And like this same way, basically big businessmen are there. So I am not telling the government are using this blood cells basically. I am not directly telling it. So it's not like that the actor basically are doing any bad stuff with the country, and the government is doing some bad stuff against that actor basically. It's not like that. So basically it's not like that, because government and we also don't know basically who is using the blood cells. So basically this might be basically very deeply data science project basically you can say, because who is using the blood cells of the people basically, that is the one question basically you can say. So who might be using that basically, who might be knowing, even basically the government mostly might be knowing, because government anything happens to any of the anything happens to city, states and country, that is basically by default government knows each and everything basically. So it's not like that the government don't know anything. So here basically we have already discussed this all the thing, that how the Bollywood's blood cells are used, how Bollywood blood cells are converted to animals, birds, and trees. This all basically are already created, and there are lots of animals created on the base of the blood cells of the Bollywood blood cells. It's not only Bollywood. Well-known famous blood cells also are used. When, for example, one big businessman is there, so his blood cells are getting used because he do routine blood cells checking. So his blood cells by default gets used. For example, one well-known basically you can say sports person is there. So his blood cells also basically by default is getting used. But who is using that basically? Where it's very deeply data science project basically. Who might be using? So here basically we are discussing few things, and here basically we are going to discuss. This is basically one question basically. Tufan basically, you know basically the cyclone basically, how basically cyclone basically runs basically, how cyclone process basically are running basically. If I say that cyclone basically are controlled by set of satellites groups, then basically it would be 100% correct basically. And the base of, because if any process is happening in this earth planet, there is some base, right? Without base basically nothing happens. So what is the base of the Tufan cyclone basically you can say? That is basically that bullets, basically you can say, on the you have seen that guns bullet, right? So in that bullet basically what is the size of the gun bullet? So exactly that is the base of the Tufan, and satellites are basically directly connected with that, the bullet size equipment basically you can say. And that equipment basically nobody can track that equipment, because it's not possible to track the within, for example the reason is, within fraction of second basically that bullet basically flies to uh, 30 to 40 kilometers within second basically you can say. So you can just imagine nobody can able to track that the bullets basically. Here basically time can be anything basically. It can be within 30 minutes, 20 minutes. It can be within 1 minute also, because that depends upon the satellite speed basically. You can say. So this topic also we are going to discuss what is actually Tufan and how the Tufan is working basically. So that we are going to discuss later on. So here basically we are discussing about uh, the software industry basically you can say. The software industry basically says that on the base of that 20,000 building, our entire process is ongoing. Our Amazon is ongoing, our Microsoft is ongoing, our Salesforce is ongoing. So on the base of this 20,000 building only, we are basically, because the base energy is this 20,000 building only. The user story is this 20,000 building, and nobody, mostly basically it's a critical place, so nobody will give the address, and nobody will track the address also basically, because if anybody tries to track that address, then basically gets into uh, tracking process basically you can say, that this person was tracking this location basically. So immediately he gets into tracking process basically. If he is by default it's track, by mistake he basically came into that area, or how basically came into intentionally he came into that area. So basically that according to the dependency of the inquiry done by the certain groups, basically they basically take the action. So here basically it's like that the critical place basically, that is basically 20,000. I have just taken as an example the 20,000 building basically is a software industry base, that is basically properties basically you can say, and that is everything. So if I say that 20,000 building, on the base of this 20,000 building only the software industry exists, then basically it would be 100% correct. So here basically we have discussed that 20,000 building, on the base of 20,000 building the software industry is running, then it would be 100 and 100%, 100 and 200, 100 what, 200% if anybody says, then it would be correct. So it's a 200 percentage correct basically. You can say that on the base of this 20,000 building, the entire software industry is working. So on the base of 20,000. So these numbers basically which I am taking, that is a rough number. In real number, it might be 20 10,000 also, and it might be 1 lakh also. It can be 10 lakh. It can be 1 crore also. So just basically number I am just taking as an example. But in the user story basically which I am telling, that is basically 100% correct. So it's basically according to the software industry, the entire other sectors are also working. So there are many sectors basically you can say are working. For example, Microsoft Energy is there. So Microsoft Energy basically you can say it has created on the base of 1,000 cities. So entire 1,000 cities are working, are running on the base of this Microsoft Energy only. So if anybody says that on the base of which source basically the city is ongoing, who is giving money to this city, basically this 1,000 cities, then basically the base will be Microsoft also. So it's not along Microsoft. Basically when the one city is getting created, there are many sectors basically involved in this city, because you can't depend on one sector, because it's not possible. It's like share bazaar basically you can say. The share bazaar, you might have some seen that. It's where basically where every second, basically every minute the fluctuation happens. It is also like this city creation basically is also like that. City running is also like that. You can't depend on one sector basically. There are 24 hours basically in the earth planet, right? So one city require 24 hours to run. So within 24 hours lots of process happens in the cities basically. So it's not possible to run the city, entire city, on the base of only software industry. The software industry have got some certain time, that's all. On that time basically the software industry has to work. For example, there are 24 hours. In 24 hours 0 to 1 hours basically is going to work by the industry groups. Then 1 to 2 hours basically 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. basically is going to work by the banking industry. Then 2 to 3 hours basically, that is am basically is going to work by the is means going to work basically. Going to work means they are going to handle the city basically. So it's a government department like this basically. There are assume that 12 sorry 1 a.m 1 p.m to 2 p.m basically is going to handle by the software industry. So like this there are 24 hours, and each and every 24 hours the times are divided to the different sector, because it's impossible to run the entire city 24 hours by the one sector groups basically. So it's not possible. So you can just imagine the entire country basically how it might be running in 124 hours basically. How many types of issues gets into a picture, how many types of problems get into picture. How many types of issue basically gets into picture, how many types of errors basically gets into picture, how many types of problems basically comes into picture. Within the country basically you have to face the problem, and basically sometimes the outside country problems also comes. So basically there are many issues to run the 24 hours basically, for the government, for the private sector also. If you are running any company basically, then you might be knowing that that how it's difficult to run one software company also, one normal company also. If you are running one store basically, then you can just imagine the security level basically you can say. First you will be, for example, when you open the store basically, that time basically you will be thinking that whether our all the materials are going to be sold or not. That tension is there. Then basically after closing the shop basically, any store basically you can say, that time basically you will get afraid that nothing happens to that store basically. So like that basically the hours get passed. So like this you can just imagine, if you are running one store only, how many types of problems we are getting facing. So this is basically 24 hours to run the one city, and that basically the big collectors are there, MLAs are there, corporators are there. So that's their duty, and the upper level is chief minister, and the over any more upper is the home minister, and the other upper is the prime minister, and more upper is the president of India. So like this, basically each and every people are responsible to run the cities, basically you can say, and it's their responsibility that nobody is supposed to get. Um, each and every people has to get the money so that they can survive their life. Nobody is supposed. For example, one person is going to Mumbai, so it's their government's duty that he is not supposed to come without job, because it's their duty, right? It's their duty that if for example one person is coming from other state, and if he gets out from that state, from Mumbai, without any job, so you can just imagine the frustration level, frustration basically you can say. Not only frustration, but basically how he will be thinking basically, that Mumbai like city basically, where basically nobody goes without any money also, and without any job. If he not gets job, then basically you can just imagine uh, his level of basically frustration. You can just imagine up to what level frustration basically that there happens basically. So here basically we are not discussing the frustration of any person. We are not discussing the but that is basically by default, because each and every task basically starts from small things only basically. So like this we are not discussing about that the government is not doing anything, government is not helping anyone, so we are not discussing that directly. So here basically we are discussing that the software industry, that is basically the 20,000 building which is currently standing at the place of the where the city, where in some any of the city basically you can say. And the Bollywood industry is telling that we have created 10 to 20 lakh buildings, and we have 16 to 17 sectors basically with us, and one of the sector is the software industry basically. So you can just imagine the critical level also, critical level of the Bollywood industry, how basically they might be writing each and every user stories. For example, one user story they have written, and in that user story basically they have written that they have software industry basically have 20,000 building. So if one user story comes into the software industry, then basically whether this user story is going to adjust in the 20,000 buildings, or some new buildings has to be here. So you can just imagine basically the user stories also basically which are getting created. So it's not easy also to create, because on the base of user stories only, on the base of user stories only, the entire stuff basically works, and the entire task also happens. So from where this each and every user stories are coming, from where these ideas are coming, from where the Bollywoods are telling that next process is this, next level is this. This is like one person has done the marriage, and his next generation is going to do. He's going to come into the earth, basically you can say. For example, one marriage has happened. After marriage basically by default the birth is going also going to happen. So how many birth is going to happen to one girl, boy? So like this, basically the next level process happens of the each and every sectors also basically. So here basically we are discussing that how Bollywood is telling that this will be the next, this story will be the next. Like this basically how basically this marriage example I have already taken, that boys and girls, boy and one girl has done the marriage, and the marriage happened, and they have generated sorry, they have given the birth of one child, one boy and one girl. So this is basically next generation basically. So how Bollywood is generating the next generation, that we are going to discuss in 154 part. This is basically 153rd number part.